Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I want to go over some of the new crafted items and changes coming in 8.1 for crafting professions. In similar fashion to the crafted gear we had available to us for Uldir, the 8.1 crafted gear is item level 385, 400, and then 415, which corresponds to normal, heroic, and then mythic difficulties in Battle for Dazala. With 8.1 being just about a month away, it's a great time to begin planning for it, whether you're trying to make gold with the new crafted item requirements or contemplating a profession swap. Now before we jump into profession specific crafted gear, I did want to mention that each crafting profession will be able to learn an ability that converts Breath of Bwonsamdi into Sanguicell and Title Core into Hydra Core. Breath is the new reagent from the 8.1 Battle for Dazala raid that will be required in most crafting, and Title Core is replacing Hydra Core where they currently drop in 8.0. Enchanting, however, is currently the only profession in 8.1 that can convert leftover Sanguicells from Uldir to Expulsom at a 20-to-1 rate. It also does require a bit of enchanting materials, however, but it's most likely a bit better than crafting and scrapping 500 pairs of uncommon crafted bracers for Expulsom. The first profession that I want to take a look at in 8.1 is tailoring. As I mentioned before, the new 8.1 crafted gear starts at 385 item level and then jumps to 400 and then 415. They do require crafting the previous rank specific piece to learn the 400 and 415 versions, which is the same way it functioned in 8.0. The emblazoned deep silk gloves and breeches are the 385 versions of tailoring and require 15 title core and a small amount of expulsum. The fortified deep sea gloves and breeches are the item level 400 crafted versions, which require 15 and 20 expulsum respectively. This is also the first time that we see Breath of Bwonsamdi required as a crafting reagent. Thankfully only 20 breath are required, which I do not believe will be a whole lot, especially when taking a look at what the 415 version requires. Breath is a new crafting reagent like I mentioned in the 8.1 Battle for Dazala raid, and will most likely function very similar as to how Sanguicell functioned and dropped in Uldir. Finally, we have the tempered deep sea gloves and breeches, which require 20 and 30 expulsum respectively. This is much less than the final mythic level pieces required in 8.0, which is going to make re-rolling these specific pieces much easier to do when hunting for that optimal pair of secondary stats. Long gone are the days, hopefully, of scrapping down 300 uncommon bracers just to roll a worse pair of gear. Hopefully. They do require 200 breath, however, which is a pretty large increase from the 400 version, but they are mythic level pieces of gear. As mentioned before, they do require the previous eye-level 400 pieces of gear to be crafted to obtain the pattern for the 415s, but with each 400 piece requiring such a small amount of breath, it might be possible to craft both 400 pieces week 1 depending on how much breath drops from each boss in Battle for Dazala. The blacksmithing crafted gear is very similar to the tailoring crafted gear, except there are legs and a belt instead of legs and gloves. The 385 versions of gear require a small amount of title core and expulsum, which should be pretty easy to acquire in the first few weeks of 8.1. They also require a small amount of blacksmithing specific materials. The 400 item level gear requires a bit more of the blacksmithing specific materials, in addition to either 15 or 20 expulsum, depending on which piece you decide to craft first. You can also see the 20 breath requirement here as well, which is the same as it was for tailoring. The 415 item level gear also requires 200 breath and either 20 or 30 expulsum, depending on which piece you decide to craft first. There's a small increase once again to the amount of storm silver and platinum ore it's required, but it's still a very small amount for what you get after crafting said piece. Having to re-roll the piece a few times, depending on how lucky you get, might become a bit more expensive, however, depending on the price of ore on your server. Leatherworking, in a similar fashion to previous expansions, has the option to craft both leather and mail gear, but in a similar fashion to blacksmithing and tailoring are pretty inexpensive to craft. The leather armor that is crafted from leatherworking consists of a pair of legs and boots, not a pair of gloves or a belt like tailoring and blacksmithing. In similar fashion, the 385 pairs also cost a small amount of expulsum and title core in addition to a small bit of hardened tempest hide and calcified bone. The 400 pairs of legs and boots cost 15 or 20 expulsum in addition to 20 breath. There is a small increase here once again in the required amount of hardened tempest hide and calcified bone, but I think having this amount increased instead of the expulsum like 8.0 makes recrafting for better stats much more manageable. Following suit, the 415 pair costs 200 breath and 20 to 30 expulsum, which is more than reasonable. We do once again see a small increase in the amount of leatherworking specific materials here, but let's just hope that RNG is on your side when crafting your first pair. I know I have a large amount of resources laying around for tailoring and leatherworking and other professions at this point anyways, so re-rolling your gear should not be too expensive. Now taking a look at the male pieces that leatherworkers can craft, they also consist of a pair of crafted boots and legs. The 385 version once again requires a small amount of expulsum and title core and a decent amount of hardened tempest hide, just like the leather version we saw a moment ago. Mist scale is the other required material for the male version instead of the calcified bone that was required for the leather pieces. The 400 pieces bring with them a small increase in the required amount of hardened tempest hide and mist scale, in addition to either 15 or 20 expulsum and 20 breath. With the 400 version requiring so little materials wise, I would not be too surprised if you were able to re-roll a few different pairs week 1 of Battle for Dazala lore, while still having enough breath to craft your 415 pair in time as well. The 415 version also has a small increase to the amount of leatherworking specific reagents, but we also see the 200 breath requirement here as well, following suit with every other crafting profession's gear. In Uldir, you were able to scrap down your 385 pair of legs or gloves, whatever you crafted, which required a large amount of sanguicell, thus receiving all of it back when attempting to re-roll your stats. I don't see a reason as to why this would change in 8.1, but it is something to keep in mind when re-rolling your 415 pieces. You will also need to take into account your other professions as well, and if it requires any breath there also. In a similar fashion to 8.0, engineering also has the option of crafting one piece of gear, and it's actually an azurite helm. In 8.1, however, the final version of it is actually a 415 item level azurite helm, which is a huge change from the mid-tier mediocre version that we had in 8.0 for engineering. Engineers can craft a helm for any armor type, and the traits it has are the same across each version and armor type. The required materials consist of platinum ore, storm silver ore, insulated wiring, expulsum, and breath, and also remain the same across each armor type and its corresponding item level. The trait choices that you have available to you are Barrage of Many Bombs, Ricocheting Inflatable Pyrosaw, Synaptic Spark Capacitor, and Relational Normalization Gizmo. All of these traits are currently in-game as of 8.0, and I will have a link to sims for each specific class and spec in the description below if you want to take a look at them for your specific class. It is important to keep in mind that even though engineering is the only profession to have a 415 craftable azurite piece, it only has one craftable piece and not two like most other professions do. Thankfully, you will not have to re-roll this item a few times to get the best stats, as azurite items do not have any secondary stats on them. And finally, we have Jewelcrafting, which is most certainly going to be one of the professions that I have when 8.1 launches. Jewelcrafting, just like engineering, only has one craftable item, but it's actually a ring. Jewelry is always a highly sought after item in dungeons and raids because every class wears them, whether you're a healer, DPS, or tank, and with the Jewelcrafting ring also having a socket, it makes it pretty much best in slot for every class. Just like the other crafting professions, you're most likely going to have to re-roll this item a few times to get the secondary stats that you want the most, and this time it's pretty expensive to re-roll. The base rank of 385 costs 4 Kraken's Eye, 30 Larable, and 30 Scarlet Diamond, and a small amount of Expulsum and Title Core. The 400 version costs 32 for each rare gem, 20 Expulsum, and 20 Breath, and the final 415 version costs a whopping 35 Larable, 35 Scarlet Diamond, 4 Kraken's Eyes, 25 Expulsum, and 200 Breath of Bwonsamdi. Rerolling this item is certainly going to be the most expensive out of all the professions, but having a best in slot ring early into 8.1 is going to be something that pretty much everyone is going to be after. I would not be too surprised to see the cost reduced a bit before 8.1 is live, but then again, this could very easily remain the same it is now. One thing's for sure though, and that's that Larable and Scarlet Diamonds will be in high demand the first few weeks of 8.1 and could be a great investment now to try and make some gold later on down the line. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this gave you all a better understanding of crafting in 8.1 and hopefully will help you narrow down your choices when it comes to your two professions. The Jewelcrafting rings will be exceptionally powerful, as I mentioned, as jewelry is always sought after in raids, and having a socket makes it even stronger. Having a 415 Azurite helm from engineering is a strong choice as well, but you only get one crafted item with engineering versus 2 from the main armor type professions, so it might be a case by case basis. Let me know what you think of the new crafted gear and changes in the comments below, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them there and I'll be sure to get back to you. If you're interested in acquiring any of the week ORs or add-ons you've seen here, I'll have a link to my Twitch and Discord in the description below where you can acquire them. If you want to see more WoW content and help support the channel, smash those like, share, and subscribe buttons as your support really helps. Thanks guys, and I'll see y'all on 8.1. Peace.